Hey, what's going on, everyone? I hope y'all are having a fantastical week. So here it is, middle of May, weather's warming up, and I am chomping at the bits to get out there. I'm also chomping at the bits to kind of get you guys out there and share the experience. I've never claimed to be a great fisherman, but I feel like I've been pretty good at sharing the things that I've learned throughout the years. So I'm dealing with a lot of conflict here because part of me, with the cabin fever wants to get out there and I want to get you guys out there to share the experience. But at the same time, it would be horribly irresponsible for me to post some kind of mass invitation on YouTube and you come out, and if you were to get sick, that would weigh really heavily on my conscience. With that in mind, I'm going to do the next best thing. I'm going to put together a Honey Badger Voodoo 10 Commandments kind of video, and I'm hoping that if you follow these tips, it'll keep you out of most kinds of trouble and maybe put some fish on the boat. Now, it goes without saying that there are never any guarantees once you step outside the house, but being armed with knowledge is never a bad thing. And the timing might be right because I have a buddy who lives near King Harbor, and that's near Redondo Beach. And he swung by on Saturday and he said the launch dock was an absolute madhouse. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to structure the list so that the most important things are up top, maybe 1, 2, 3. And then maybe the lesser important things are toward the bottom. And so it goes without saying that if you can't get past the first 3, 4 items, then the rest of the items don't matter because you shouldn't be out there. Okay, without further ado, let's kick it off. So sitting on top of my list is wind. I think most new people are going to guess it's going to be waves or swells, but really a 6 to 8 foot swell shouldn't sneak by anyone's radar. And so if you think it's a good idea to launch into something like that, I could give you 1,000 commandments and you're probably still going to get into trouble. Now, the reason I think wind can get a new person into trouble is because it is sneakier than swells. It's less predictable and it can change throughout the day, at least in my neck of the woods, okay, which is Redondo Beach. So what you want to do is you want to go to a site like windy.com, and I'll leave a link. And as a matter of fact, it's always good to check 2 or 3 more sites. So windfinder.com is another good one. And if all of the forecasting sites tell the same story, then you can be reasonably assured that you're in a good place. Okay, so go to your favorite forecasting sites, and then from there you want to project, okay? You want to drag this little timeline to the point where you want to launch. So if you want to launch on Saturday at 6 a.m., then you know that this band right here is telling you the wind speed. So essentially, as a new person, you want to look for something a day where the wind does not go over 10 miles per hour on this band. Now, the green band here will tell you that the wind can gust up. Okay, it happens every day. But again, generally speaking, you're looking for numbers under 10 here. Now, just as importantly as speed, you're looking for the direction of the wind. Okay, so as I mentioned, in my neck of the woods, the wind pattern will be out of the east early morning, and then it'll go kind of in a clockwise fashion. So if you predict that you're going to be off the water or getting ready to get off the water by, let's say, around noon, okay, then you know that around noon, the wind is going to be blowing out of the south. And so hopefully, wherever you decide to venture out, in this case, you want to go south, you're going to have the wind at your back once you are done fishing and you are ready to paddle home. Super important, okay? So not only the speed, but the direction. Okay, let's take a look at a different spot. This is San Simeon, California, which is along the central coast. And the general trend is the further north you go, the more rugged and beautiful the scenery, and the more rugged and dangerous the elements. So again, we're projecting that we're going to launch 6 a.m. on Saturday, and as you can see, the wind is very mellow. As a matter of fact, it's projected to be under 10 miles per hour throughout the day, which is very unusual for this area. again, it's typically very much more rugged. But look at the wind direction. Here, the wind pattern doesn't swirl around in a clockwise or counterclockwise fashion. It's projected to flow from north to south pretty much throughout the day. So again, everything being equal, okay, you generally want to launch into the wind in the morning and have it at your back as you're coming back home. Now, there are many other factors. Maybe there are some great structure and formations down south, in which case you got to deal with it. But if you have a choice, everything else being equal, you want that wind at your back when you're coming back home. So regardless of where you are along the coast, typically when you launch early morning, like 5, 6 a.m., the winds are very mellow, something under 5 miles per hour. So going into that wind is not a problem. The winds will definitely pick up speed and peak out sometime between like 12 to 3. And so it can go from like 5 miles per hour to 15 miles per hour. And you don't want to fight a 15 mile per hour headwind after you're done fishing and you're tired. So a couple of other factors. Once you understand how the wind works, okay, mellow early morning, peaking during the afternoon. If you arrive at the launch at 5, 6 a.m. and it's blowing 10, 15 miles per hour, I'd be very, very leery. Okay? The other factor is you want to understand the trend, okay? So let's say you are going to launch on Thursday, okay? But look ahead. If the forecast says that on Friday the winds really ramp up, okay, you got to be leery because again, predicting weather and wind is a science, but it's not an exact science and timing can be a little bit off. So if it is projected to really ramp up the day after and the timing is a little bit off, you could be in trouble. So be careful there. Okay, let's move on to element number 2, and that is swells. And as I mentioned, swells are typically much more predictable and much more honest than wind. If you were to ask me, I'll tell you that I'd much rather deal with bigger swells than bigger wind. And I'm talking about something reasonable, right? Something between 3 to 5 foot. I'm not saying go out into, again, 6 to 8 foot swells. And beyond the raw size number, like 3 foot swell, 5 foot swell, 7 foot swell, there's another element called swell period or intervals. So let me explain how swell periods or intervals work. Okay, so here, let's say you have a Friday and you have swells that are predicted to be 3 foot. This would be Saturday. Again, same size, predicted to be about 3 foot. But the difference is this green line, and that represents the number of seconds in between bumps. So the swell period here is 5 seconds. Swell period here is 15 seconds. And they will feel vastly different, okay? So Saturday here, where you have an interval of 15 seconds in between bumps, is going to feel much more mellow than a Friday where you have 5 seconds in between bumps. Okay, so let's take a couple of real world examples. Okay, so we're back at Redondo Beach and we're gonna launch on Saturday, 6 a.m. The 2 purple bands represent the swells, the direction, and the size. So you're looking at numbers like 4, 3, 3, and that represents the swell height. Okay, so that's okay. So as a beginner, you're probably looking for something like 3 foot and nothing significantly bigger than 3 foot. The swell period presents more of a problem because you're seeing numbers like 6.5, 6.6. So from a beginner standpoint, you want to see big numbers there. You want to see like 12 seconds, 14 seconds. So I would say this is probably not ideal for the new person. And then we'll compare and contrast that to San Simeon. Okay, as I mentioned, San Simeon is much less forgiving than something like SoCal. And so for the same Saturday, 6 a.m., look at the swell sizes, 8, 7, okay? So again, much more rugged than SoCal typically on any given day. And the swell periods aren't that great either, okay? So, they're all under 10 seconds. So that combination right there tells you that for a new person, it's not going to be a good day. And to be honest, there aren't many good days along the Central Coast. Okay, to summarize wind and swells, for wind, you're looking for a number that's 10 miles per hour or under throughout the day, and it's blowing in the same direction that you want to go home to. Swells, you're looking for something 3 foot and under, and you're looking for big numbers in terms of intervals, 10 seconds, 12 seconds, 14 seconds. Okay, commandment number 3 is visibility. That means fog. And this is an element that people are typically not very aware of, or they just overlook. And fog during the summertime, not a huge deal, but it can be a huge deal in the wintertime. Or if you're fishing in an area that you're not intimately familiar with. So visibility can go from no big deal to sheer panic. Okay, so let me describe a couple of scenarios. We're back at Redondo Beach, you launch into clear skies, and then a really thick fog rolls in and you can't see like 50 feet ahead of you. Still, you're in SoCal, and this is the metropolis. What's the worst that can happen? You call Coast Guard, they pick you up, they may talk about you in the local fishing forums. You'll get over it. Not a big deal. Okay, so let's paint that same scenario, but at a different spot. This is Montana de Oro along the central coast. Just beautiful and very dangerous, okay? So first of all, you're dealing with a beach launch, okay? But let's say the launch goes smoothly and you launch into clear skies. And so you come out of the cove, you're wowed by the scenery, you're having a good time, you venture south, you're catching fish, and then that same thick fog rolls in. Now you can't see but 50 feet ahead of you. It's hard for me to adequately relay the sense of panic that ensues. Okay, you can't see any of this really dangerous and rugged coastline. So let's say that you have an idea of where you launched from. Okay, so you make a beeline from here, or you try to make a beeline back to your launching spot, and now you find yourself anywhere near this stuff, and that's the definition of panic, and that's the definition of danger. It goes without saying that if you're going to launch into unfamiliar territory, you'd better have some kind of navigational device, some kind of GPS device. And you better be dropping waypoints early and often. Okay, so you want to drop a waypoint here at the launch, drop one here, drop one here, drop one here. You're basically making a virtual breadcrumb of how to get back to where you launched from safely. Without that, I guarantee you will be in a world of hurt. So to summarize, don't overlook visibility. Okay, look for big numbers, 10 miles. And this is tiesforfishing.com, and I will leave a link in the description. Okay, commandment number 4 is rain and the pathogens that it can bring. Now, there are some general guidelines as to how long you should wait before going into the water after a good hard rain here in Southern California. Now, some of the numbers that I've seen or read about say about 3 days, but I think it all depends on where you live. So I'm based out of the Los Angeles area, and the LA River during a good hard rain will dump water unchecked into the Santa Monica Bay. And the Santa Monica Bay is pretty famous for not being the cleanest bay in the world. And on occasion, I'll hang out with some really smart people in the healthcare industry, and they tell me that for our neck of the woods, you should wait at least a week after a good hard rain before venturing out into the water. Okay, we are picking up some momentum here. Either that or I'm getting tired of editing. Okay, so tip number 5 is stay away from the mouth of the harbor. Here I'm zoomed into the King Harbor area, which is Redondo Beach. And I'm sure there's some science behind the water dynamics that's way above my pay grade. But generally speaking, the roughest water that I found is always near the mouth of the harbor. It could be Redondo Beach, it could be Marina del Rey, but that's typically where the roughest water is. And it's really ironic because for most people, having sight of land is going to be comforting. So they're going to want to congregate right around the mouth of the harbor naturally. But again, you have to fight that instinct because it really is the worst place to be. Not only in terms of the water turbulence, but the boat traffic. In terms of safety, you are much better off like 5 miles offshore than hanging out around here. Okay, tip number 6 is how to deal with seasickness. Okay, I'm kind of lucky in that I'm not really prone to being seasick, but I've gone out with people who have really suffered and I feel horrible for them. Okay, so in terms of medication, I can't cover every homeopathic remedy out there. So I'm going to focus in on like the drugs. So Dramamine is over the counter. The problem with Dramamine is it'll make you drowsy. There is a prescription only medication called Meclizine. Some people call it Bonini. And that is apparently pretty effective, and it doesn't make you as drowsy as Dramamine. Okay, but if you take either medication, some people wait until they're seasick before they take the pill, and by then it's too late. I think you want to take it an hour before, not on an empty stomach. Right. Beyond that, the best way to get seasick, okay, is to be out there bobbing like a cork and you're trying to tie a rig with your eyes focused in on an object that's like 12 inches away from your nose. That's a surefire recipe to get seasick, even if you're not prone to getting seasick. So tie all of your rigs on dry land. Okay, tip number 7 has to do with as you're entering or exiting the kayak. The rule of thumb is stay as low as you possibly can get. Okay, if you can lead with your butt as you enter or exit the kayak, do so. Okay, the taller your center of gravity is as you enter or exit a kayak, the more likely you are to tip over. That's pretty simple. Okay, so it's super important to get in low. See how low he is as he's entering the kayak? You don't want to be tall. Okay, you don't want to be high center of gravity and then put a lot of weight on one side of the kayak. It's a sure way to tip the boat. Okay, for tip number 8, I'm going to describe how to perform a proper reach around out on the open ocean on a kayak. This is probably the #1 way people get into trouble in terms of tipping over as they're out on the open ocean. And so the scenario goes something like this. They have something in the back of the kayak, typically, a tool, a lure in their crate, and they want to reach back and grab it. And in doing so, they will only twist their torso and it'll alter their center of balance. And if at the wrong time a swell comes by and catches you, you're going to go into the drink. It is super critical to take any kind of high center of gravity mass, in this case it's your torso, and keep that mass centered on the kayak. And so what you want to do is, instead of twisting just your torso, throw both of your legs over, and that way you stay centered as you reach for stuff in the back of the kayak. Super important. Alrighty, the remainder of the tips are going to focus in on fishing and how to best put the odds in your favor as you go after fish. So everyone understands that sometimes the bite can be hotter or colder, and the two best times typically is early morning and toward dusk. But there are some other important factors that are involved as well. One big factor is the moon phase, and specifically how it affects water movement. When you have a full moon or a no moon, you're gonna have higher highs and lower lows in terms of tides, and that means more water movement. And everything else being equal, fish tend to bite better when there's more water movement. And so let me show you graphically instead of bogging you down with numbers. Here I'm at tiesforfishing.com, and again I'll leave a link in the description. And you'll see that during the full moon or thereabouts, you're going to have more fish activity. Just count up the number of fish. So full moon here, you have 1 fish, a 2 fish, a 3 fish, And then as you transition from full moon to a half moon, look what it does to the number of fish, right? So Half moon, fewer fish. And then as you transition from half moon to no moon, again, the water movement is greater and then you have more fish again. That's typically how it works. Furthermore, there is the intraday factor. So you could have a good day, a poor day, but even within that day, there are better times or worse times in terms of time window. So if I scroll up here, it should tell you that for this particular day, the bite's going to turn on around 10 a.m. and kind of tail off around 12 p.m. and then pick up again around 10 p.m. So that can be important as well. Now, as you all know, this is not an exact science, but I would summarize it like this from my experience. When Ties for Fishing tells me that the fishing is going to be really good, I've never really had an awful day. It's been at least medium good. When Ties for Fishing tells me that it's going to be a bad day, sometimes I've had, good, fair days, but I've never had a great day, and I've had poor days. So there is something to this science. Okay, tip number 10 is put your nose into the wind. Now this is more like a 102 type of topic, and this is a concept that just about every new person really struggles with. So let's say you've got yourself a brand new shiny fish finder, and let's be real, fish finder trumps every other factor in terms of putting fish on the boat, okay? And you're paddling along, you're in deeper water. This is especially true in deeper water, like 200, 250 feet, and you mark something on your sonar. Now you have to understand that some of these marks are not very big. They could be like literally 20, 40, 50 feet across, and many fish are congregated on that spot. And so you stop and drop your rig. Okay, so in 250 feet of water, it could take quite a bit of time for your rig to hit the bottom. I mean, it could be like 10, 15 seconds. And you have to understand that all the while, there are forces at work that are pushing you around. Okay, like 80, 90% of the time, the wind is going to be talking the loudest. Sometimes it's current, right? And so it's critical that you stay on top of that little mark and drop your rig down to that mark. But again, all the while you're being pushed around. So you have to pay attention to the angle of your line. Okay? As you're dropping down, you're proactive with your feet if you have a pedal kayak, or your paddle if you're paddling. And you have to make sure that your line is going straight down. And depending on how hard the wind is moving you, it may take a real concerted effort. But understanding that you're being pushed around, even though you have no references, like on land, you know you're moving because there's a fire hydrant there and it's moving. With water, you have no visual references, so you have to rely on your line and your electronics, okay? Being able to drop down on that little spot is the difference between getting bit and not getting bit. It's that important. Okay, long video, but that summarizes Honey Badger Voodoo's 10 Commandments. And a lot of it is just experience, just time on the water, but it's always good to be armed with knowledge beforehand. And I truly believe that if you kind of adhere to some of these rules, you're going to be safe, first and foremost, and maybe put some more fish on the boat. With that being said, thanks for dropping by. Hit that like button if it's not too much trouble. Get out there, be safe especially, and we will see you soon. Bye for now.